The rain had been falling over Chicago since before sunrise. Gray clouds covered the skyline, and puddles stretched across the parking lot of the towering glass office building on West Monroe Street. At 5:15 a.m., while most of the city still slept, Daniel Carter unlocked the employee entrance carrying his old blue janitor's cart. At 42, Daniel had spent nearly 15 years cleaning office buildings. It wasn't glamorous work. His uniform had faded from years of washing. His shoes had tiny cracks near the soles. His hands were rough from chemicals and endless hours of mopping floors. But every morning he reminded himself of something his late father had always said. A person's job doesn't define their value. Their character does. Daniel believed those words with all his heart. Every paycheck went towards supporting his family. His wife, Emily, worked part-time at the public library. Their 12-year-old daughter, Lily, dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Their 8-year-old son, Noah, loved building toy airplanes from recycled cardboard. Money was always tight, sometimes painfully tight. The family had learned to celebrate little victories: pizza on Friday nights, movie marathons with popcorn made at home, birthday cakes baked from scratch. Despite the struggles, their home was filled with laughter. That morning, Daniel quietly polished the marble lobby floor while soft jazz played through the building's speakers. Outside, expensive cars pulled into the underground garage one after another. Executives hurried inside carrying designer briefcases and coffee cups. Few noticed the man making sure the building sparkled before they arrived. Daniel didn't mind. He smiled politely at everyone. Some smiled back. Most didn't. Around 7:10 a.m., while emptying the trash near the front entrance, something caught his eye. A dark brown leather wallet lay beside a decorative planter. It looked expensive. Very expensive. Daniel picked it up carefully. It felt unusually heavy. He glanced around. No one seemed to be looking for it. Inside were several platinum credit cards, a driver's license, business cards, and something else. A thick stack of cash. Hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. Daniel quietly counted just enough to realize it was more money than his family usually earned in several months. His heart skipped. His old pickup truck desperately needed repairs. Emily's medical bills from last winter still weren't fully paid. Lily needed braces. Noah's school had been asking for field trip fees they couldn't afford. One envelope inside the wallet contained even more cash with a handwritten note. Private investment meeting. Daniel slowly closed the wallet. For just a brief second, a dangerous thought crossed his mind. No one would know if a little disappeared. He immediately shook his head. No, he whispered to himself. My kids deserve a father they can respect. He walked straight toward the security office. The morning security supervisor looked surprised. Find something? Daniel placed the wallet on the desk. I think someone important lost this. The guard opened it. His eyes widened. Good grief. He quickly looked at the driver's license. Do you know who this belongs to? Daniel leaned closer. The name read, Richard Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Global Industries, one of the wealthiest businessmen in Illinois. The security guard whistled. This wallet belongs to the owner of the entire company. Daniel simply nodded. Can we contact him? The guard reached for the phone. I'll call his executive assistant immediately. Within 15 minutes, black SUVs rolled into the private entrance. Several security personnel entered first. Then came an older gentleman wearing a simple navy overcoat. Unlike the flashy executives surrounding him, he looked calm and approachable. Richard Harrison, the billionaire himself. He thanked the guard before turning toward Daniel. So, Richard said with a gentle smile, you're the man who found my wallet. Daniel nodded modestly. Yes, sir. Richard opened it. Everything was exactly where it belonged. Every dollar, every card, every document. He looked directly into Daniel's eyes. You didn't take anything. No, sir. Why not? Daniel smiled. Because it wasn't mine. Richard stared silently for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. The billionaire smiled. Not the polite smile people gave strangers. A genuine one. As if he'd just confirmed something important. He extended his hand. Thank you, Daniel. As the two men shook hands, neither of them realized that finding the wallet was no accident. And Daniel had just passed the first part of a secret test that would soon change his family's life forever. Daniel thought returning the wallet was the end of the story. After shaking Richard Harrison's hand, he quietly picked up his mop and went back to work. Within minutes, the lobby was busy again, and the billionaire disappeared into the executive elevator. Daniel never expected to see him again. That evening, he drove home in his old pickup truck, which rattled loudly every time he pressed the brakes. As he pulled into the driveway of his small house, Lily and Noah ran outside. "Dad's home." Noah wrapped his arms around Daniel's waist. Lily smiled. "Mom made your favorite chicken pot pie." Inside, Emily noticed the tired look on his face. "Long day?" Daniel smiled. "Interesting day." Over dinner, he told them about finding the billionaire's wallet. Noah's eyes grew wide. "Was there really that much money?" Daniel nodded. "More than I've ever held in my life." Lily looked at him thoughtfully. "Weren't you tempted?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said honestly, "For 1 second, yes." The room became quiet. "But then I remembered something Grandpa always said." Emily smiled because she already knew the answer. "If it isn't yours, it isn't yours." Daniel nodded. "I want you two growing up proud of your father, not ashamed of him." Lily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm already proud of you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work as usual. But something felt different. People who had never spoken to him before suddenly greeted him by name. Even senior managers smiled politely. At 10 a.m., the head of building operations approached him. "Daniel?" "Yes?" "Mr. Harrison would like to see you." Daniel froze. "Me?" The manager nodded. In the executive boardroom, Daniel nervously straightened his uniform. His sleeves were faded. There was a tiny bleach stain near one pocket. He suddenly wished he owned better clothes. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, everything looked different. Soft carpets, paintings worth thousands of dollars, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Richard Harrison stood beside the window. Only one other person was in the room, his executive assistant. Richard smiled warmly. "Good morning, Daniel." Daniel nodded. "Good morning, sir." Richard gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." Daniel hesitated. "I've never sat in a boardroom before." Richard laughed softly. "There's a first time for everything." After they sat down, Richard placed the wallet on the table. "I owe you an explanation." Daniel looked confused. "What do you mean?" Richard folded his hands. "Yesterday's wallet wasn't entirely an accident." Daniel frowned. "I'm sorry?" Richard nodded. "For the past year, I've been trying to find someone inside this company whom I could trust completely." Daniel listened quietly. "I've promoted talented people. I've hired graduates from the best universities. I've worked with brilliant executives. But several have disappointed me." He sighed. "One stole company funds, another leaked confidential information, a third lied about safety inspections." Richard looked directly at Daniel. "So I created a simple test." Daniel blinked. "The wallet?" Richard smiled. "Contained enough money to tempt almost anyone." Daniel sat speechless. "You mean—" "Yes. You were being tested." Daniel looked down at his hands. "I didn't even know." Richard nodded. "That's exactly why the test worked." He leaned forward. "You're the first person who returned everything without touching a single dollar." Daniel finally asked, "So, what happens now?" Richard smiled again. "That depends." Before Daniel could say another word, the boardroom doors opened. 5 senior executives walked inside. Some looked annoyed. Others looked curious. One of them whispered, "That's the janitor?" Richard stood. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Daniel Carter, the most trustworthy employee in this company." Several executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. None of them knew Richard Harrison had something much bigger planned, and Daniel's life was about to change in a way he never imagined. The boardroom fell completely silent. 5 executives in tailored suits stared at Daniel as though they couldn't believe why a janitor was standing beside the company's billionaire owner. One of them, Chief Financial Officer Mark Benson, forced a smile. "Mr. Harrison, surely there must be some misunderstanding." Richard Harrison calmly shook his head. There isn't. He turned toward Daniel. Yesterday, this man proved something none of us can learn from a resume. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I'm just a janitor, sir. Richard smiled. No, Daniel. You're a man whose integrity stayed intact even when no one was supposed to be watching. Several executives lowered their eyes. Richard continued. Character is worth more than talent. Talent can build a company. Character keeps it standing. The room was quiet enough to hear the rain tapping against the glass windows. Then Richard surprised everyone again. Daniel, I'd like to offer you a new position. Daniel blinked. Me? Yes. I'm not educated enough to be an executive. Richard chuckled. I'm not offering you an executive's job. The billionaire slid a folder across the polished table. Daniel opened it with trembling hands. The title read, Director of Employee Integrity and Community Relations. He looked up in confusion. I don't understand. Richard explained. Our company has over 12,000 employees. Many feel invisible. Cleaners, maintenance workers, cafeteria staff, security guards. I need someone who understands their lives. Daniel swallowed hard. I've never managed anyone. I can teach management. Richard smiled warmly. I can't teach honesty. The salary listed inside the folder made Daniel's heart race. It was nearly 4 times what he currently earned. It included health insurance for his entire family, a retirement plan, and an education fund for his children. Daniel could barely speak. This can't be real. It is. But why me? Richard answered without hesitation. Because yesterday you protected my money. Tomorrow I want you helping protect this company's values. That evening, Daniel drove home in stunned silence. When he walked through the front door, Emily immediately noticed something was different. Were you fired? She asked nervously. Daniel laughed. No. Worse? He smiled. I think I got promoted. Emily frowned. Promoted to what? Instead of answering, he handed her the folder. She opened it. Her eyes widened. She read the salary twice, then a third time. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Daniel, this changes everything. Lily grabbed the papers. Dad, does this mean we don't have to worry about Mom's medical bills anymore? Daniel nodded. No, sweetheart. Noah looked up hopefully. And maybe we can fix your truck. Daniel laughed through happy tears. I think we finally can. The 4 of them hugged in the middle of their tiny living room. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel frightening. It felt full of hope. The following Monday, Daniel arrived wearing a new suit the company had provided. As he entered the building, the security guards applauded. The cafeteria staff cheered. Housekeepers smiled proudly. They had all heard the story, not because a janitor had become a director, but because one of their own had been recognized for doing the right thing. Daniel realized something important that morning. Returning the wallet hadn't made him rich. It had revealed the wealth he had carried inside him all along. And that was something no amount of money could ever buy. Daniel quickly settled into his new role, but he never forgot where he had come from. On his first day as Director of Employee Integrity and Community Relations, he did something that surprised everyone. Instead of moving into his spacious new office, he walked downstairs to the maintenance room. His old coworkers looked up in confusion. Daniel? One of them said. Shouldn't you be upstairs with the executives now? Daniel smiled and picked up a mop. I just came to say thank you. The room fell silent. For 15 years you were my second family, he continued. A new title doesn't change that. The housekeepers and janitors broke into applause. A few even wiped away tears. Over the next few weeks, Daniel spent less time behind a desk than anyone expected. He visited every department in the company. He sat with cafeteria workers during lunch. He rode the freight elevators with delivery staff. He chatted with security guards during the night shift. Rather than asking, "How's work?" he asked, "How are you?" For the first time, many employees felt truly seen. One evening, an elderly cleaner named Maria hesitated before speaking to him. Mr. Carter, may I tell you something? Daniel smiled. Please call me Daniel. Maria lowered her voice. I think someone is stealing company supplies. Daniel didn't dismiss her concerns. Instead, he thanked her and quietly began looking into it. Over the next few days, Daniel reviewed inventory reports, delivery logs, and security footage. Something didn't add up. Thousands of pounds worth of expensive computer equipment had disappeared over the past year. The paperwork showed everything had been properly delivered. But the warehouse shelves told a different story. Daniel shared his findings with Richard Harrison. Richard frowned. I suspected something was wrong, but I never imagined it was this serious. Together, they authorized a discreet internal investigation. Within a week, the truth came out. The theft wasn't being carried out by warehouse workers. It wasn't the cleaners. It wasn't the security team. It was being organized by Mark Benson, the company's chief financial officer, the same executive who had questioned Daniel in the boardroom. Mark had been creating fake invoices and arranging for expensive equipment to be redirected to Shell, companies he secretly controlled. The fraud had cost Harrison Global Industries millions. When confronted with the evidence, Mark had no defense. He was immediately dismissed and later arrested. The following morning, Richard called an emergency meeting with every employee. More than 1,000 people gathered in the company auditorium. Richard stood on the stage beside Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, today our company avoided an even greater loss. He paused before placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Not because of technology, not because of auditors, but because one honest man listened to people everyone else ignored. The auditorium erupted in applause. Richard smiled proudly. Never underestimate the person who quietly does the right thing. Daniel looked out across the crowd. He saw cleaners, receptionists, engineers, accountants, and executives all standing together. At that moment, he realized the billionaire's wallet had never been the real test. The real test was whether he would continue to live with integrity after success found him, and he had. News of the fraud spread quickly. Local newspapers praised Harrison Global Industries for uncovering the scheme before even more money was lost. But inside the company, employees weren't talking about the dishonest executive. They were talking about Daniel, the janitor who had never forgotten where he came from. A week later, Richard Harrison invited Daniel to lunch, not in the executive dining room, but at a small family-owned diner a few blocks from the office. Daniel smiled as they slid into a booth. I thought billionaires only ate at expensive restaurants. Richard laughed. My late wife loved this place. She always said the best meals came with honest conversations. After the waitress brought their food, Richard grew quiet. Daniel, may I ask you something? Of course. What would you change if this company were yours? Daniel thought for a moment. Then he answered honestly. I'd make sure the people doing the hardest jobs could actually afford to live. Richard leaned forward. Go on. I've worked with people who skip meals so their children can eat. I've seen employees choose between buying medicine and paying their heating bill. I know single parents working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. He looked down at his coffee. They don't want charity. They just want a fair chance. Richard didn't interrupt. When Daniel finished, the billionaire smiled. I was hoping you'd say something like that. The next Monday, Richard called a company-wide meeting. Every employee gathered in the auditorium once again. Richard stepped onto the stage. For years, Harrison Global has measured success by profits. He paused. Starting today, we'll also measure it by the lives we improve. The audience listened intently. Richard announced a series of sweeping changes. Every full-time employee would receive a meaningful pay rise. No worker would lose health insurance because of financial hardship. A scholarship fund would help employees' children attend college or trade school. An emergency assistance program would support families facing unexpected crises. Every employee would receive at least 2 paid volunteer days each year to serve their communities. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then it erupted in thunderous applause. Some employees cried openly. Others hugged one another. Daniel looked around in disbelief. He never imagined that one honest decision could lead to changes affecting thousands of families. That evening, Richard walked into Daniel's office carrying a small wooden box. I have one more thing for you. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was the same brown leather wallet. Confused, he looked up. Richard smiled. I want you to keep it. I can't. Yes, you can. Richard pointed to the wallet. This reminds me that wealth isn't measured by what's inside. He placed a hand over Daniel's heart. It's measured by what's in here. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I'll treasure it. I know you will. As Daniel left the office that evening, he slipped the old wallet into his briefcase. It no longer represented money. It represented a choice. The choice to do the right thing, even when no one was watching. And although Daniel didn't know it yet, that choice was about to inspire someone. Far beyond the walls of Harrison Global Industries, a month after the company's new programs were introduced, Harrison Global felt like a different place. Employees smiled more. Turnover dropped. Families who had struggled for years finally had breathing room. Richard Harrison often told reporters that the company's success wasn't due to a new business strategy. It started with one honest janitor, he would say. Daniel always felt embarrassed when he heard those words. I just did what anyone should have done, he'd reply. But deep down he knew that wasn't entirely true. Not everyone had made the same choice. One Saturday morning, Daniel took Noah to the neighborhood park. While Noah raced his friends across the playground, Daniel sat on a bench enjoying the warm sunshine. Suddenly, he noticed a small crowd gathering near the bike racks. A brand new mountain bike had been left unattended. No one seemed to know who it belonged to. One boy whispered to another, "We could just take it. No one's around." Daniel watched quietly. Before he could stand up, Noah walked over to the bicycle. He looked at it for a moment, then turned to the park manager. "Excuse me, sir. I think someone lost their bike." The manager smiled. "Thanks for telling me." He placed the bike safely inside the office while they waited for its owner. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. An hour later, a frantic 12-year-old boy came running into the park with tears streaming down his face. "My bike! Has anyone seen my bike?" The manager wheeled it out. The boy hugged it tightly. "Thank you. My grandparents saved for almost a year to buy this for me." He turned to Noah. "My mom said you found it." Noah shrugged with a shy smile. "It wasn't mine." Daniel's eyes filled with pride. Those 4 simple words sounded so familiar. It wasn't mine. The very lesson he'd hoped to teach his children had taken root. That evening, Daniel told Richard the story over the phone. Richard chuckled. It seems honesty is contagious. A few days later, Richard asked if Noah would join him at the company's annual Family Appreciation Day. Noah was nervous, but Daniel agreed. When they arrived, hundreds of employees and their families filled the company courtyard. Richard stepped onto the stage. "I'd like everyone to meet a young man." He invited Noah beside him. Richard shared the story of the lost bicycle. Then he looked at the crowd. Integrity doesn't begin in the boardroom. It begins at home. The audience stood and applauded the young boy. Noah blushed bright red and hid behind his dad. Richard smiled. "Today, I'm announcing something new. Harrison Global will launch the Daniel Carter Integrity Scholarship, awarded each year to students who demonstrate honesty, kindness, and service to others, not just perfect grades." The applause grew even louder. Daniel was stunned. He whispered, "Sir, you named it after me?" Richard smiled warmly. "No, Daniel. I named it after the example you set." As father and son stood together on the stage, Daniel realized that the greatest reward for returning a wallet wasn't the promotion, the salary, or the recognition. It was seeing his children choose the right path on their own. And in that moment, he knew his father's words had become a legacy that would live on for generations. Autumn arrived in Chicago, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson. Nearly a year had passed since Daniel Carter had found the wallet that changed his life. The Daniel Carter Integrity Scholarship had already helped dozens of students whose families could never have afforded university. Employees at Harrison Global no longer saw honesty as something ordinary. They saw it as the company's greatest strength. Yet Daniel never let success change him. Every morning, he still greeted the security guards by name. He still ate lunch in the employee cafeteria. And once a week, he quietly helped the evening cleaning crew, not because he had to, but because he wanted them to know they were never forgotten. One Monday morning, Richard Harrison walked into Daniel's office holding a plain white envelope. "There's someone who wants to thank you," Richard said. Daniel looked puzzled. Me? Richard handed him the envelope. There's no return address. Daniel carefully unfolded the handwritten letter. It read, Dear Mr. Carter, you don't know me. Last year, I was one of the employees involved in Mr. Benson's fraud. I wasn't the mastermind, but I stayed silent because I was afraid of losing my job. When the truth came out, I expected my life to be over. Instead of treating everyone with anger, you encouraged the company to give people who admitted their mistakes a chance to rebuild their lives. Because of that second chance, I confessed everything, cooperated with the investigation, and accepted responsibility. Today, I have an honest job. My marriage has been saved, and my children have their father back. Thank you for believing that people can change. You saved more than my career. You saved my family. A grateful father. Daniel lowered the letter slowly. His eyes filled with tears. Richard smiled. I thought you should know. Daniel shook his head. I didn't save him. Richard replied softly, Sometimes, giving someone the chance to become better is the greatest gift you can give. A few weeks later, Harrison Global celebrated its annual Community Day. Hundreds of employees volunteered across Chicago, serving meals, cleaning parks, renovating shelters, and mentoring young people. Daniel and his family spent the day at a children's community center. Lily helped care for rescued animals from a local shelter. Noah taught younger children how to build toy airplanes from recycled materials. Emily organized a book drive for families in need. As the event came to an end, Richard stepped onto a small outdoor stage. I've built companies for over 40 years, he said. I've signed billion-pound deals and opened offices around the world. He paused and looked at Daniel. But the greatest investment I've ever made was believing in one honest man. The crowd erupted into applause. Daniel felt overwhelmed. He walked to the microphone. I don't deserve this praise alone, he said. My parents taught me honesty. My wife stood beside me through every struggle. My children remind me every day why doing the right thing matters. He smiled at the crowd. Integrity isn't about one big decision. It's about making the right choice, over and over again, even when no one is watching. The audience rose to their feet. But none of them knew that an even more emotional surprise was waiting for Daniel the very next day. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Harrison Global expecting an ordinary workday. Instead, he found every employee gathered in the company atrium. The lobby, where he had once pushed a janitor's cart before sunrise, was decorated with blue and silver banners. A stage stood in the center. Emily, Lily, and Noah were sitting in the front row, smiling through tears. Daniel turned to Richard Harrison. What's all this? Richard grinned. It's time to finish the story. Daniel laughed nervously. I don't understand. You will. Richard stepped onto the stage and addressed the crowd. 1 year ago, a man found a wallet. Most people think this story is about money. He shook his head. It never was. It was about a choice. A giant screen behind him showed photos from Daniel's life. Pictures of him mopping floors before dawn, helping elderly coworkers carry supplies, volunteering at food banks with his family, standing beside scholarship winners. Employees applauded after every photo. Then Richard continued. Today, I'm announcing that Harrison Global's new Employee Education and Leadership Center will officially be named. He paused as the curtain behind him dropped. Large silver letters appeared. The Daniel Carter Center for Integrity and Leadership. Daniel covered his mouth. He couldn't speak. The applause seemed endless. Richard looked at Daniel with a smile. You once told me that a person's job doesn't define their value. I've never forgotten those words. He handed Daniel a small wooden frame. Inside it was a note. The same note Daniel's late father had written years earlier. A person's job doesn't define their value. Their character does. Daniel stared at it in disbelief. How did you... Richard smiled. Emily shared the story with me. I tracked down your father's original handwritten note and had it preserved. Daniel's tears finally spilled over. For a long moment, he couldn't say a word. When the applause faded, Daniel walked slowly to the microphone. He looked at the hundreds of employees before him, then at his wife, his daughter, his son. Finally, he spoke. I thought returning that wallet changed my life. He smiled softly. But I was wrong. It revealed the life I was already trying to live. He paused. If you're waiting for the perfect opportunity to become an honest person, don't. Character isn't built in one extraordinary moment. It's built in ordinary moments, one choice at a time. The room was silent. You may never become a billionaire. You may never have your name on a building, but every single one of us has the chance to become someone our children are proud to call family. The audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Even seasoned executives wiped away tears. As the celebration ended, Noah slipped his small hand into Daniel's. Dad? Yes, buddy? When I grow up, I don't care if I'm rich. I just want to be like you. Daniel knelt and hugged his son tightly. In that moment, he realized the greatest reward had never been the promotion. It wasn't the salary. It wasn't the recognition. It was knowing that his children had learned the value of honesty. Not from his words, but from his actions. Sometimes the smallest decision can change a life. And sometimes it can change thousands. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that honesty, kindness, and integrity still matter. Together, let's spread stories that inspire the best in all of us.